Hey, don't touch that car. The entire Lamborghini showroom went silent. A man in a simple jacket stood beside $1 million Lamborghini as the owner rushed toward him. Do you even know how much this car costs? The owner shouted. The man calmly replied, I was interested in buying it. The owner laughed. Buying it? People like you should admire these cars from outside. Everyone around him started laughing. But they had no idea who they had just humiliated. Because moments later, everything was about to change. But to understand why this happened, we need to go back to where it all started. Earlier that morning, Richard Harrison sat inside his office overlooking the city of London. The office was modern, but surprisingly quiet. Unlike many successful businessmen, Richard did not surround himself with unnecessary luxury. His desk was simple. His clothes were simple. But the company behind him was anything but simple. Richard Harrison was the founder and CEO of Harrison Digital Solutions, one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the United Kingdom. For more than 20 years, Richard had built his company from a small idea into a global technology business. His company created advanced digital systems and cybersecurity solutions used by major organizations around the world. But despite his success, Richard remained a private person. He rarely appeared in magazines. He avoided interviews. And he never believed that expensive clothes were proof of success. To Richard, the way you treated people mattered more than the things you owned. That morning, his assistant, Daniel, walked into his office carrying a folder. Good morning, Mr. Harrison. Richard looked up and smiled. Good morning, Daniel. Daniel placed the folder on the desk. The final arrangements are ready. Richard opened the folder and looked through the details. After years of hard work, the company had just reached one of its biggest achievements. Richard wanted to celebrate the people who helped make it happen. Not with a simple bonus. Not with a company dinner. He wanted to give his senior team something they would never forget. Daniel smiled. You really decided to do this? Richard looked at him. They gave years of their lives to help build this company. They deserve something special. Daniel nodded. The vehicles will be ready at the dealership. Richard stood up and grabbed his jacket. Daniel looked at him. Sir, are you going directly there? Richard nodded. Yes. Daniel looked at Richard's clothes. A simple jacket. A plain shirt. No expensive watch. No designer clothing. Are you sure you don't want to change first? Richard looked confused. Change? We are only going to choose cars, Daniel. Daniel smiled. But it's a Lamborghini showroom. Richard laughed. Daniel, my clothes don't decide what I can afford. He picked up his keys. Let's go. A few minutes later, Richard left his office and drove through London. He had no idea that a simple decision would soon create a moment he would never forget. Because when Richard Harrison walked into that Lamborghini showroom, people would not see the successful businessman. They would only see his appearance. And that mistake was about to cost someone everything. Richard's car slowly arrived in front of the Lamborghini showroom in central London. The building stood out among the other shops around it. Glass walls. Luxury vehicles displayed under bright lights. A place where people came to purchase some of the most expensive cars in the world. Richard stepped out of his car and looked at the showroom. To him, it was just another business place. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He wasn't there to prove his success. He simply had a decision to make. Inside the showroom, customers walked around admiring different vehicles. Some were dressed in expensive suits. Others arrived with luxury watches and designer clothing. The sales team immediately noticed those customers. They were the people they expected to spend money. Then Richard walked through the glass doors. A simple jacket. A plain shirt. No bodyguards. No group of assistants following him. For a moment, nobody paid much attention. Richard calmly walked toward the vehicles. At the center of the showroom was a beautiful yellow Lamborghini. He stopped and looked at it. He studied the details carefully. The design. The technology. The engineering. A young sales consultant named Emma Brooks noticed him. Unlike the others, she didn't judge him. She walked toward him with a professional smile. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome. Can I help you with anything? Richard turned and smiled. Good afternoon. Yes, I would like to know more about this Lamborghini. Emma nodded. Of course, sir. This is one of our newest models. She began explaining the features of the car. Richard listened carefully. He asked questions. Not because he couldn't afford it, but because he respected understanding what he was buying. From across the showroom, someone noticed the conversation. Victor Collins, the owner of Collins Luxury Motors. Victor had built his dealership by selling some of the most expensive vehicles in London. Over the years, he became known for one thing. He could quickly identify wealthy customers. But there was one problem. He started believing that he could judge someone's success just by looking at them. Victor looked at Richard from a distance. He noticed the simple clothes, the ordinary appearance, and immediately made a decision. He walked toward them. Emma. Emma turned around. Yes, Mr. Collins. Victor looked at Richard. Is everything okay here? Emma smiled. Yes, sir. I was just showing him the Lamborghini. Victor looked surprised. Then he gave a small laugh. The Lamborghini? Richard looked at him calmly. Yes. Victor looked Richard up and down. You are interested in this car? Richard nodded. I am. Victor smiled. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile someone gives when they think they already understand a situation. Interesting. Emma noticed the change in Victor's tone. Mr. Collins. But Victor ignored her. He looked at Richard. Sir, do you know the price of this vehicle? Richard calmly replied. I was hoping you could tell me more about it. Victor laughed softly. The price isn't something everyone needs to know. The atmosphere inside the showroom started changing. Some customers nearby began listening. Richard remained quiet. Victor continued. We have many people who come here just to look. They take pictures. They ask questions. But they are not serious buyers. Emma looked uncomfortable. She could feel where the conversation was going. Richard looked at Victor. I understand. But Victor wasn't finished. He looked at Richard's simple clothes again. And in that moment, he made the mistake that would change everything. Victor looked at Richard's simple clothes again. A quiet smile appeared on his face. Sir, let me be honest with you. Richard looked at him calmly. Victor continued. This is not the kind of place where people come just to look around. A few customers nearby started paying attention. Richard remained silent. I understand, Richard replied. But Victor shook his head. I don't think you do. He pointed toward the Lamborghini. This car costs more than most people earn in years. Emma looked uncomfortable. Mr. Collins, maybe we should just show him the details first. Victor ignored her. Instead, he looked around the showroom. Do you know how many people walk through those doors every week pretending they can afford these cars? Too many. Richard calmly answered. I'm not pretending. Victor laughed. Really? He looked at Richard's jacket. Then prove it. The showroom became quiet. Richard didn't respond. Victor continued. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you walked into the wrong place. Some customers exchanged uncomfortable looks. Emma stepped forward. Sir, I believe every customer deserves respect. Victor turned toward her. Emma, this is a luxury dealership, not a charity office. That sentence made the room silent. Richard looked at Emma. He could see she was embarrassed by what was happening. Victor walked closer. Let me save you some time. You don't need a tour. You don't need to ask questions. You already know this isn't for you. Richard took a deep breath. I came here to make a purchase. Victor smiled. A purchase? He looked around at the other customers. Did everyone hear that? A few people looked away. They were no longer laughing. They were starting to feel uncomfortable. Victor continued. Sir, people who buy cars like this don't walk in wearing clothes like that. Richard looked at him. How exactly do people who buy these cars look? Victor answered without hesitation. They look successful. Richard gave a small smile. And what does success look like? Victor didn't answer. For a moment, there was silence. Then Victor looked at Richard's shoes. Please don't make this difficult. I have customers who are actually ready to buy. Richard remained calm. Are you asking me to leave? Victor nodded. I think that would be best. Emma looked shocked. Mr. Collins. Victor raised his hand. No. He is wasting our time. Richard slowly looked around the showroom. The expensive cars. The customers watching. The employees staying quiet. Then he looked back at Victor. He wasn't angry. He wasn't embarrassed. He was simply disappointed. Richard reached into his pocket. Victor immediately assumed the worst. But Richard didn't take out money. He simply took out his phone. He looked at the screen for a moment. Then placed it back. Victor smiled. Changing your mind? Richard looked at him. No. I was just confirming something. Victor frowned. Confirming what? Richard calmly replied. That I was in the right place. Victor laughed. I think you are confused. Richard looked at Emma. Thank you for your help. Then he turned and started walking toward the exit. But Victor wasn't finished. He wanted the final word. Next time, make sure you know where you belong before walking into places like this. Richard stopped for a moment. He turned around. Everyone watched. Then he said quietly. Sometimes people reveal more about themselves when they think they are judging someone else. And with that, Richard walked out of the showroom. The doors closed behind him. Nobody inside knew. They had just lost the biggest opportunity they would ever receive. Richard walked out of the Lamborghini showroom and entered his car. For a few seconds, he simply sat there quietly. He looked through the windshield at the busy streets of London. He wasn't angry. He wasn't looking for revenge. But he was disappointed. Not because Victor refused to sell him a car. Richard had experienced rejection many times throughout his life. What disappointed him was how quickly someone judged another person without knowing their story. He started the engine and drove away. Inside the showroom, Victor returned to his office as if nothing important had happened. He believed he had protected his dealership from someone who wasn't a serious buyer. But Emma couldn't forget what happened. She walked into Victor's office. Mr. Collins. Victor looked up. What is it? Emma hesitated. I don't think you handled that situation correctly. Victor leaned back in his chair. Emma, this business is about understanding customers. I knew exactly what kind of customer he was. Emma looked at him. Are you sure? Victor frowned. What does that mean? Emma didn't answer. She simply walked away. Later that afternoon, Victor received an unexpected phone call. His assistant entered the office. Mr. Collins, there is someone from Harrison Digital Solutions on the phone. Victor immediately sat up. Harrison Digital Solutions. The name was familiar. Everyone in London's business world knew that company. It was one of the biggest technology companies in the country. Victor picked up the phone. Hello, this is Victor Collins. The voice on the other side was professional. Mr. Collins, we are calling regarding the luxury vehicle purchase plan for our company. Victor smiled. Of course, we would be happy to assist. The person continued. Our CEO was interested in purchasing several vehicles today. Victor smiled. That is excellent news. Then he heard the next words. His name is Richard Harrison. The smile slowly disappeared from Victor's face. For a moment, he said nothing. Richard Harrison? Yes. Victor looked toward the showroom floor. Suddenly, the simple man in the jacket came back into his mind. The man he laughed at. The man he told to leave. The man he assumed could not afford the car. Victor's expression changed. Are you talking about Richard Harrison, the founder of Harrison Digital Solutions? Yes. Silence filled the phone call. Victor slowly stood up. His heart started beating faster. Because he finally understood. The man he humiliated was not a random customer. He was one of the most successful entrepreneurs in London. The same man who had the ability to buy the Lamborghini without even thinking twice. The same man he judged because of a jacket and a pair of shoes. Victor looked toward Emma. She was standing outside the office. Their eyes met. And for the first time that day, Victor realized he had made a serious mistake. But the question was, would Richard ever return? The next morning, Victor Collins arrived at the dealership earlier than usual. But something was different. The confidence he had yesterday was gone. He walked through the showroom, looking at the same Lamborghini that started everything. The same car Richard wanted to buy. The same car beside which he had humiliated him. Victor remembered every word he said. People like you should admire these cars from outside. The words now sounded different. Because he finally knew the truth. The man he judged was not someone who walked in hoping to look wealthy. He was someone who had already achieved what many people only dreamed about. Victor picked up his phone. He searched for Richard Harrison. The results appeared immediately. Articles, business interviews, company achievements, photos of Richard standing with some of the biggest names in the technology industry. Victor stared at the screen. This man. He owns one of the biggest technology companies in the country. For the first time, Victor felt embarrassed. Not because he lost a sale, but because he had treated someone unfairly. Meanwhile, at Harrison Digital Solutions, Richard was sitting in his office. Daniel walked in. Mr. Harrison. Richard looked up. Yes. I heard what happened at the dealership. Richard smiled slightly. It's nothing. Daniel looked surprised. Nothing. Sir, they disrespected you. Richard closed the folder in front of him. Daniel, their mistake was not knowing who I was. Their bigger mistake was believing someone's value depends on what they wear. Daniel nodded. Richard continued. Success doesn't give anyone permission to look down on others. Later that day, Victor decided to visit Richard's office personally. He arrived at the building and was immediately welcomed by the receptionist. May I ask who you are here to see? Victor took a deep breath. Richard Harrison. A few minutes later, Richard entered the meeting room. Victor stood up. For the first time, he wasn't acting like the powerful person in the room. Mr. Harrison. Richard nodded. Victor. There was a quiet moment. Victor looked uncomfortable. I came here because I owe you an apology. Richard listened. I judged you before I knew anything about you. I embarrassed you in front of other people. And that was wrong. Richard looked at him. Many people would have used that moment to attack. But Richard didn't. He simply said, everyone makes mistakes. Victor looked surprised. But the important thing is what we learn from them. Victor lowered his head. I hope you can forgive me. Richard paused for a moment. Then he smiled. I forgive you. Victor looked up. But I want you to remember something. One day, the person you ignore might be the person who could help you. And the person you respect because of their appearance might not have the character you think they have. Victor nodded. He understood. A few days later, Richard returned to the dealership. But this time, everything was different. The same employees who ignored him before now welcomed him with respect. Emma smiled when she saw him. Welcome back, Mr. Harrison. Richard smiled. Thank you, Emma. Victor personally walked toward him. Mr. Harrison, we are honored to have you here. Richard looked around the showroom. Then he looked at the Lamborghini. He smiled. I think this time, we can finally talk about the car. Everyone laughed. But this time, the laughter was different. It was not mocking. It was respect. Because they had learned a lesson they would never forget. Never judge someone by what they wear. Never assume you know someone's story. Because sometimes, the person standing quietly in front of you may be the person you least expect. The lesson from this story is simple. Never judge someone by their appearance. You never know the person standing in front of you or the journey they have been through. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Remember, respect costs nothing, but it means everything.